All right, we've got a few people joining us, so we will get started. Good evening, everyone. My name's Sue. I'm from the Gut Cancer Foundation. You'll see my name popping up on some of the emails that you've been receiving from us. I want to welcome you along tonight to the second of our series of webinars through the Give It Up month. And with us tonight is nutritionist Sean Robertson from Four Wheels of Health. And he is going to be addressing the issue of withdrawals and cravings, which, as we're on day 6 of the challenge, I'm sure there's many of you out there that are being troubled by some of those things. So Sean will be here with some answers. We're going to have a Q&A. There's a Q&A facility on this webinar. So post your questions as we go along for Sean. And at the end of his bit of presentation, we will then go through the Q&A one by one, so your questions will get answered in due course. We are recording the webinar, so if you want to make notes, sure, but we will have a recording available tomorrow, be posted in the Facebook group and also emailed out to you. So you will be able to reference it. And for those of you not joining live, I hope you enjoy the session. So I'll hand over to Sean now. I will come back, obviously help out with a Q&A towards the end, but also talk about an exciting initiative we've got this week for the fundraising. So do stay tuned. So over to you, Sean, on cravings and withdrawals. What have you got to tell us this evening?
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I think this is probably a topic that a lot of people can relate to and struggle with, especially if you're going like cold turkey and giving up any of these 3 options or all 3 options, just straight off the bat. So there are 3 different things that I want to cover in this webinar. The first one is around alcohol and sugars and how it affects our dopamine system, so it's a reward hormone, and what you can do to re-regulate your dopamine or rewire it or reroute it so that you're not being hormonally driven to these cravings. The next one is around specifically sugar cravings and how that links to the gut and what you can do about that. And the third one to finish up will be around hunger increase. Now, these aren't necessarily going to affect everyone. Okay, you may just breeze through and not experience these things at all, but they are very, very real, and biologically we understand why, and I'll get into the explanations of that. So if you're looking to reduce your cravings and potentially your suffering, then that's essentially what this video is for. So with alcohol and sugars and how it relates to our dopamine. Now, both alcohol and sugar, when you consume them or when you are thinking about consuming them, you get a huge release of dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is your reward hormone. It's the hormone that drives you. It's so strange because it's the brain rewarding itself for its own behaviors. So it's a very, very weird paradox that goes on. Now, what happens is, because if we're regularly consuming alcohol and sugar, it doesn't have to be in huge amounts, but just regularly, your dopamine system gets almost saturated and you become desensitized. Just like if you it's like anything, actually. If you too much of something, you become desensitized to it. Too much sugar, you need something sweeter for it to taste sweet. If you have no sugar, then your desensitization goes down and things that wouldn't normally be sweet start tasting very sweet. So it's about your sensitivity. Now, because alcohol and sugar release so much dopamine, this is where you get these hormonal kind of backlashes. Because when you cut them out, suddenly you are still in a state where you are desensitized to dopamine and you need you need stimulus to the same level as sugar or alcohol in order to kind of satisfy your brain's need for dopamine. Now, the way to get around this is to go after different dopamine releasing activities. And the best and easiest way to do this is to set micro goals. And this isn't a brainstorming goal session that we're doing here. This is just it can be as simple as, and some of you may love this advice if you like lists. In the morning, write a list of just small tasks that you need to do during the day, and just ticking them off. It can be something as simple as take the trash out, clean the microwave. Could be sweep the floor. Like household stuff is very, very easy. It could be walk the dog. Maybe they're things that you would normally do anyway, but by writing them down and making it a goal for yourself, when you go to complete them, your brain releases dopamine and can kind of satisfy its need for this reward hormone. Other ways is just doing things where you feel a sense of achievement. So if you're giving up the sofa, that's a very, very easy one, because when you exercise afterwards, you feel very, pleased with yourself. You feel what you could say is hormonally in the brain satisfied with your progress. Another way is to track your progress. So, taking however you're measuring any goals, and it doesn't have to be your health, but any area of your life where you're practicing something, learning something, seeing progress unfold releases a lot as well. So any way that you can set goals and complete doesn't even have to be to do with health. As long as you're doing this, you're releasing dopamine, and you're going to counteract this desensitivity that you get because you've now completely cut out your sugar and alcohol intake. So on a hormonal level, this is a really, really powerful way to not have these hormonal kind of cravings for these substances kind of lingering over you, and it's more of a behavioral thing. Now, for sugar cravings themselves, this is a really interesting one, because a lot of your sugar cravings come from your gut, the actual gut bacteria you have. And because in your gut, there's good and bad bacteria, and the bad ones mainly feed on sugar. Now, if you've cut out sugar, what you've done is you have cut off the food source for all of these bad bacteria in the gut, and they don't like it very much. So when you're getting these sugar cravings, what is actually happening is these bad bacteria are releasing chemicals, and they basically communicate with your brain via the brain that you have around your gut, or the neurons around your gut, and manipulate you to want sugar so that they get fed. And that's a lot of what sugar cravings are, is the bad bacteria telling your gut brain, we want sugar, and then that goes up to here, and then you go out and find sugar for them. And that's just the bad bacteria in your gut wanting to survive. But of course, that's not in our best interest, and it's actually not your own cravings. It's from these bacteria in the gut. So if these cravings for sugar are coming from your microbiome, the collection of bacteria in your gut, that's what you want to be addressing. So what you can do about this is take a probiotic supplement. Now, you don't need to be taking a probiotic supplement every day of the year, but just one dose. So it usually comes in a pack. It's normally around 30 days, 20 to 30 days. Just getting through that in the interim, in the beginning, what you're doing is you're loading up your gut with good bacteria. What probiotics are, you are adding good bacteria to the gut, and then they can outcompete the bad bacteria for territory, for resource, the real estate, your gut lining, and kind of push them out and decrease the numbers of the bad bacteria, so the voice that you get in the form of a sugar craving, that voice that comes through, is a bit quieter, because you've got more of the good bacteria voice, which are craving other things that are actually healthy. So probiotics are a really, really good way to do that. It's the same thing for probiotic foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, tempeh. Again, you don't need to be having a huge amount of them. It's just about having them consistently, especially in the beginning when the cravings are a bit harder to kind of counteract this. You can also use coconut products. So it's mainly like coconut oil, coconut cream, and coconut milk, because it's the fats in coconut that are very, very good for our gut health and good for our good bacteria. So the types of fats in coconut products, they basically are often used as fuel with in our intestines to make a more protective layer in the gut that separates your gut lining and the bacteria that live inside of it, which means less inflammation, which means there's less there's less fighting between your immune system, which is mainly in the gut, and the good bacteria that you have. So keeps their populations bolstered. So coconut products are really good for that as well. And the last one is around resistant starch. So this can be quite a lengthy topic, but I'll try and keep it relatively brief and concise. So resistant starch is a really good tool for you to use for keeping carbohydrates in the diet, but you don't have the downside of insulin spikes or feeding the bad bacteria in the gut. Resistant starch is when you take any starchy food, so rice, potato, pasta, like any of these starchy foods, and you cook it and then you cool it down again. And you have to cook it and cool it down, like in the fridge, so it's cold. So basically that's what happens, the rice is hard when it's uncooked, you cook it, it becomes, soft and delicious, and then you cool it down again and it all sticks together. Same with pasta, you put it back in the fridge, it all stick together. So once it's all stuck back together, that is when it has become resistant starch. Because what has happened is the starch chains, they're just chains of sugar, have started like this. You've cooked them, the chains have opened up, and then when they cool down, they partially close. So what resistant starch is essentially a type of fiber. It's called resistant starch because it is starch that is resistant to digestion. But it just so happens that it acts as kind of like a pseudo fiber, like a fake fiber in the gut, and your gut bacteria love it and they digest it really, really well. So it's great for your good gut bacteria, but it's not sugary enough for your bad bacteria to use as a fuel. So it's a very powerful way nutritionally to kind of give a helping hand to the good bacteria in your gut and continue to slow down the growth of the bad bacteria. And this will also help with the cravings, because this in turn is creating an imbalance in a good way, where then you're going to have more good gut bacteria than bad ones, and therefore less of that voice coming from the bad ones asking for sugar. So very, very important to understand this around sugar cravings. They're not often you or having a sweet tooth. They're often to do with the gut bacteria that we actually have. Now, around hunger, this is one that not everyone is going to experience, but it can pop up. So if it is you, then it's worth knowing this. So with hunger, you can have an increase just in general hunger, general satiation. Because if you're giving up sugar, if you're giving up alcohol, if you're giving up the sofa, so you're exercising more, then the chances are you are going to get, whether it's a goal or not, you are going to get some form of body fat loss, small to impressive. It's probably going to happen. Now, when you lose body fat, there is a hunger hormone called leptin, and it decreases. So normally leptin helps to regulate your appetite, by suppressing it. Okay, so when leptin levels are very high, you're not hungry. When leptin levels are very low, you feel very hungry. And some people have a condition where it's completely unregulated. So what happens is they're always hungry all the time, and they will literally eat themselves into into the hospital because they're so hungry all the time. So it's a very important hormone. And when you lose weight, it decreases. And the reason for this is because your body, if you think about it, remember, I say this very, very often, we are animals. Okay, we forget it often, but we're monkeys, right? And as mammals, we still are bound to the same kind of laws of biology where we act a lot on instinct. So when your body loses weight, it actually doesn't like it that much because your body fat is your safety net for when there's no food to go around, which happened a lot to our ancestors. You know, if you had some body fat, there's a good chance that you make it through the winter, or you make it through the tough times. So when you lose body fat, your body panics a little bit, and it causes this hunger increase because it wants to motivate you to find food and put the weight back on. So just knowing this, just on its own, it's kind of like a mental willpower you can use to get through these extra hunger cravings or increases that can come up. And it's usually around the 1 to 2 week mark, or when some results start to come through. So just knowing this, you can just say to yourself, you know, hey, I'm eating regularly, like my normal amounts, but I'm hungrier than normal. It's just my leptin playing up and it's temporary. It's just my leptin playing up because results coming through. So I just need to kind of mentally get through it. And then in a couple of weeks, it restabilizes. Your body realizes that actually everything's fine. There's still plenty of food coming in. The weight loss doesn't matter, and these hunger cravings subside. So this can happen, and it's, like I said, normally around week 2 or so that it will come up. Now, there are some other ways that you can kind of fight fire with fire. So leptin being a hunger hormone, you can use other appetite and hunger hormones to kind of play the other side for you. So there are some hunger hormones that are released when your stomach stretches, that to tell your brain that it's full and it's not hungry anymore. So you can use this to your advantage, and simply when you have a meal, just bulk it out with vegetables. You know, just really, because vegetables, they have almost no energy in them, right? So no one gains weight eating vegetables. So you really, really bulk out your meals with vegetables, make it, you know, very, very large, so you're really stretching the stomach, and that will counteract this leptin decrease that you get. The other way is drinking lots of water. You know, lots of water, especially a lot at once, stretches the stomach, tells the brain it's not hungry, and it counteracts this leptin. So stretching the stomach is a really, really good way to, fight fire with fire and kind of reduce the impact of this extra hunger that comes through as the results happen. So that's all I really wanted to cover for this one, but it's very, very handy to know, especially around the sugar cravings being linked to the gut, and this extra hunger that you can get and being linked to hormones. That way you don't have to you don't blame yourself. You don't say, oh, you know, I'm so weak-minded, I'm struggling. You know, you don't have to blame yourself for it, right? As long as you take responsibility for it and you say, well, this is what I'm feeling, but it's coming from my bacteria, or it's coming from these hunger hormones, and it's just temporary. I just need to get over the speed bump, and then things will smooth out. Because, you know, every sugar craving that you ignore means that it's bad bacteria that have asked for sugar, you haven't given it to them, they die off. So next time, that sugar craving is going to be a quieter voice. For your extra hunger increase with leptin, every time you can ignore that and just get past it, it means that it's another day that your leptin will rebalance and your hunger will come back to normal levels. And remember, cravings only, like, they're not an all-day thing. It's not 24 hours. How long does a sugar craving or a hunger craving last? For like 5 or 10 minutes? You know, it's not all day. It may pop up several times throughout the day, but it's not a consistent thing. It just kind of comes in waves. And so if you just get yourself through, maybe just set a timer on your phone, like you say to yourself, get this message in your brain, I really want to have something sweet. Set a timer for 10 minutes, go and drink a glass of water. Once the time is over, how do you feel? You know, they do not last forever. It's just these 5 or 10 minute windows that you have to get through. And if you can, you know, just be strong mentally and get through them, it's actually fine. They do not last forever. So it's just about these small intervals of willpower that you just need to apply yourself. And that's really, really what it comes down to. And of course, having the knowledge on gut health and hormones really helps, because you have an explanation for it, and you can kind of ruse yourself into getting through it just with that knowledge. So, as they say, knowledge is power. So that's what I wanted to cover for today. Did you want to go through some stuff to wrap up, or if there are any questions that have come through?
I'm just checking. There's no questions come through at the moment, but I had a question, because I know I've been following some of the questions that have come in on our Facebook group, and it was really interesting what you were talking about with starch and cooking it and then cooling it down. So just some ideas of what people could do there. I guess sort of some cold pasta salads with some chopped up chicken or something like
Potato
that.
salad.
Potato salads, yeah.
Yep.
We did have a question during the week about sushi, and I'm interested to know your thoughts on that, around cooling down the rice, the added sugar in there and so on. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so sushi, like the sushi that you buy, is generally a no-go, because the sushi that you buy, out in public, generally they use, like, it's kind of like a rice syrup, right? So it sticks all the rice together, makes it really, really sticky, makes it easy to put together. And it's very sugary. So, and it's also all white rice. It's obviously going to be better to have brown, red, or black, or wild rice, because it still has the fiber in it, it still has all the proteins in it. It's not just pure sugar like white rice is. If you're making sushi at home and you're not adding, this sugary syrup that they do to make your rice super sticky, then it would actually be okay. And I say okay because it is still white rice. And the reason that white rice tastes so good compared to brown or black or wild or red rice is because it doesn't have the fiber, so it turns to sugar in your mouth far more quickly when you start digesting it. So the recommendation around rice is actually to use the other varieties, not just white. So long answer short, no to sushi in public. If you're making it at home, it's going to be better, but still not ideal because it's white rice. So I'd give it like a very tentative yes if it's in small amounts.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. Now, we have got a question come in from Kerry. She said, hi, your tips are super helpful. Are healthy juices from juice bars like Tank full of sugar, and therefore should I avoid?
Just plug this in a battery. So with the Tank juices and everything, generally yes, they are still just a lot of sugars. Fruits and vegetables are full of antioxidants, a lot of vitamins, minerals, what we also call proactive factors, things that are very good for our gut, digestion, mood. But as soon as you juice your fruits, they lose the benefit of fiber, and it's just sugar. It's just sugar, and it's just as bad as, well, almost as bad as like soft drinks. So there's a saying that there is in the like nutrition realm of eat your fruits whole and juice your vegetables. Now, I would argue, eat both whole. I mean, that's how they're designed to be eaten, right? Or like evolved to be eaten. But if you juice your fruits, yeah, it's a lot of sugar. There's no fiber to slow down the absorption of the sugars, and you lose a lot of the benefit that you would normally get for your gut bacteria if you were eating it whole. So those juice bars, Tank and everything, although look, they're very, very yummy, if you're going there, you would have to get a juice that is just the vegetable juice, right? Just the vegetables. And I've had it before. It was like beetroot, kale, and a few other greens and things, and it was actually quite nice. But you're not drinking something sweet at that point, so it's more of like a detox juice at that point. So yeah, great question. The Tank bars, I wouldn't give them a tip just for the sake of avoiding sugars.
So is there a difference between when you juice fruits and vegetables as opposed to blending them? Do you retain the fiber when you blend them?
You do retain the fiber when you blend them, but it's still not ideal because, like, and the explanation for this comes around chewing. So you chew your food to turn it into smaller pieces, right? We call masticating our food, right? That's what chewing is. You chew to turn your food into smaller pieces. And when you blend something, like a smoothie, you cannot get a more chewed meal than something that has been blended, right? That's like chewing taken to the next level. So you've maximized the surface area that your digestive juices can act on it and break it down and absorb it. So what it means is that if you're blending your fruits, the surface area is maxed out, and you are going to absorb so much more of the nutrients, but also the sugars, much faster than if you were eating it whole. Because I mean, and also let's face it, most people these days don't chew as well as they should, right? Kind of, especially when there's a screen in front of you, we actually just kind of wolf down our food. So yeah, blending it, still making the availability of the sugars far too high for what a normal load in the body would be.
Oh, that's really interesting, because there was a bit of chat in the group about that earlier in the week. Question from Amy. Sorry, I came in late, but just in case, what are your thoughts or advice around zero sugar beverages? Will most of them contain sweeteners that can spike blood sugar, or is it just as bad as standard soft drinks?
Yeah, so good question. Was it Amy?
Amy, yeah.
Yeah, good question, Amy. So I actually briefly went over this in the last video, but basically with these zero sugar beverages, you're right, they do still contain sweeteners because they're still sweet, right? If there's no sugar and it tastes sweet, then it must contain something that's making it sweet, so it must be sweetness. And sweeteners still have an effect on your insulin, and oftentimes they will have a negative impact on your good gut bacteria as well, acting as almost like a poison to your good gut bacteria. Because remember, they're very, very small and they're very sensitive. They're just bacteria. So these other molecules that we're putting in our body, like sweeteners, they react with the good gut bacteria as well, and that's going to have an effect. So my stance on them is, I honestly don't know which is worse, the high sugar or the high sweetener, because you have to understand, it's so complex, like what happens on a microscopic level in the body when we have these things. what we do know is that if you have a lot of sugars, then you're going to have an insulin spike, and the sweeteners will cause something similar. So my stance on it would be, it's better to try and work around that craving for sweetness and maybe not desire it as much. If you absolutely must give in, there are actually some healthier versions, like there's some healthy colas and things that actually are really, really good, but they're not using lots of artificial sweeteners. They're using more natural ingredients, and that's what I would go after. Try and find the really, really natural ones. Even if you find something that is very, very low sugar, but still enough sweetness. So what I mean by that exactly is, on nutrition labels, you want to go for something that's like 4 or 3 grams of sugars per 100 mils or less. I think I mentioned in the last video, there's a kombucha brand called Remedy, and they're generally very low sugar. So if you need something that's a beverage, I would actually go after something that does contain sugar rather than sweeteners, but is just very low sugar.
That's great. Thanks, Sean. We've got a question here from Rich. He's saying, I've been getting headaches since cutting sugar. Is this normal? If so, how long can I expect them to last?
Yeah, absolutely, that's normal. One thing you can do to help headaches, because if the headaches, assuming that they are not from dehydration, so let's assume that you're fully hydrated, then the next thing would be it's pressure in the head. And you can alleviate this using green tea. So green tea contains caffeine, but it doesn't have the same properties of coffee. So green tea is really, really good for alleviating headaches, as long as it's not from dehydration. If it's from dehydration, just drink water. But yes, it's like if an alcoholic gives up alcohol, a drug addict gives up their drugs, a sugar addict gives up their sugar. Like, the sugar is very, very addictive drug, and giving it up, it is hard because the brain is reliant. That's what addiction is. It's reliant on it. So headaches are absolutely, definitely a part of the process some of the time. It won't happen all the time, but it definitely can. What was the second part?
The second part was, how long might they last for?
How long? Generally 2 weeks. Generally 2 weeks, and things clear up. And that's because it takes 2 weeks for your entire digestive system, or the gut lining, to replace all the cells. So every 2 weeks, it's completely renewed. So what that means is, because that's where everything is coming from, right? Your engine, your digestive system, that's the engine of your body. So every time that renews, that's when things kind of reset. So 2 weeks would be about the time, maximally, that it would take to get over the hump.
Right. Now I've got a question from Hannah. How do you deal with social situations where there's only bad stuff? Feels so awkward to stand there not eating and drinking, like work, drinks and food. $45 budget, so always something like pizza or fish and chips and soft drink and wine and beer, and I don't drink alcohol. So we've got some suggestions for Hannah on what she could perhaps do in those situations.
Well, with social situations, because I've had exactly the same experience. I know exactly what you're talking about. What I kind of figured out, and this is just what worked for me, was I just asked myself, okay, well, what do I value more? Do I want to stick to what I'm doing here, the health journey, or in this case, it's giving these things up? Do I want to stick to this? Is that more important, or is it more important to blend in socially? And remember, it's only temporary, really. And when I decided, and hopefully you decide the same thing, that it was more important to put this health side of things first, or this challenge, to give it up first as a priority, you kind of just own it. So I went to a lot of parties. I had a whole year in uni. I know it's the worst time to do it, but I had a whole year in uni where I was sober from everything, sugar, alcohol, like everything. And I went to all the parties, but I just brought tea, and I would get to the parties, these house parties, and I would ask to boil their jug and brew up some tea, and people would look at me like I was nuts, and they'd say, "Are you drinking green tea?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's delicious. I love tea." And you know what? People love it. People love it when you just own it and you just say, "No, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I want." And they're actually quite inquisitive, and it's, I think, very interesting for people. So you just have to decide that's what you want to do and just own it. And you know, if you're really for it, like, people will support you. It's funny that way. I hope that advice works. I mean, I can only really share what worked for me, um, but that would be the advice, you know, I can give on that topic.
And I guess, from my perspective of doing these things, it's an opportunity for you to share what you're doing as well, if you're faced with a situation like that. Yeah. So just, yeah, as Sean says, own it
Yeah,
and
yeah,
share
yeah.
what you're doing and the reasons why. And yeah, maybe take your own, whatever you're drinking, a kombucha, maybe one of these low sugar kombuchas or something.
Exactly.
And yeah.
And people respect you for it, you know, like, as long as you stick to your guns, and you can make a game out of it. Like, you don't have to be serious. They say, "Oh, well, you know, why don't you have some of this or some of that?" And you say, you just say to them, "Oh, no, I can't. Don't tempt me." You know, it's like, I'm doing this challenge. Support me. Like, help.
Yeah.
Don't let me have these things. You know, you can make it lighthearted.
Yeah. Another question. I don't know if it's the same, Hannah, but so are you saying that refined carbs have the same effect on the gut bacteria as sugar?
Yes, because, well, yes, to a slightly lesser degree, because carbohydrates, I'm not sure where in nutrition knowledge you kind of sit, but so apologies if I'm explaining something that you already know. Carbohydrates are sugars just attached into a long chain. And what happens is, when we eat carbohydrates, there's an enzyme in our saliva called amylase, and it cuts up these carbohydrates, these chains, into sugars, and then we have sugar. So when you eat rice, it's starch, which is a carbohydrate, it turns into sugar. You eat potato, starch, which is carbohydrate, it turns into sugar. I mean, you can even find in, like, a lot of these powder supplements, they'll contain, like, maltodextrin, and that's a carbohydrate. Body cuts it up, the amylase in your saliva turns to sugar. So yes, potato chips, just any refined carbohydrate you can think of, it will turn to sugar in the body, a little bit slower than, if you are having straight, like, table sugar, which is obviously the purest form you're going to get. But it's still going to be sugar at the end of the day once it hits your intestines.
Okay, and a couple more coming in. Ashton, if a tomato paste jar has lots of sugar per 100 grams, does this mean it is all added sugar, or is that just from natural sugar?
They will normally add sugar. If you look at the composition of what a tomato is made of, it is 86, oh no, I think it's like 94% water. What was it? I can't remember the exact figure. It is so high in just water, right? That, what's left for sugar is between the fiber and all the antioxidants and everything, it's not that much. So tomatoes are, you could class, a slightly more sugary vegetable. Well, I guess tomatoes are technically a fruit, but you get what I mean. compared to others like like salads, lettuce, spinach. So it does have more sugars than those like leafy greens, but it's still not that much. So if you find a tomato paste or sauce, they normally have a lot of extra added sugar in them. And it's very, very hard to find sauces that don't have added sugar because, the market makes what the people want, and people like things that are sweet. So they give them sweet sauces. You can make your own at home. Gonna give it a go.
Yeah. Good suggestion. Yeah, make your own.
Well, honestly, the best suggestion is whether it's tomato paste or tomato sauce or any sauce for that matter, any condiment. All you need to do, and it'll take a few minutes of your time when you're at the supermarket. Say you're looking at tomato paste, look at all the different brands, look at the nutrition panel, and per 100 gram serve, look at the total carbohydrates or sugars and compare them between the brands. You will very quickly find which one is the lowest in sugar, and then just choose that one. And that goes for any food product. Look at the nutrition labels, compare the brands, just see which has the lowest number of sugars or total carbohydrates. Look at that, compare it, and you'll remember it, right? You'll get it, and then next time you're shopping, you don't have to think, you know the brand that is the lowest in sugar. You do that for all your food products and condiments and everything. And suddenly, there may only be small differences between the brands here and there, but you do that collectively with all your foods that you're getting, and it makes a huge difference for the food that you consume throughout the week. Like, God knows how much less sugars you're consuming in total just because you've picked the lowest sugar brands for all your different food products. It really does add up.
No, I think that's really good advice. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, certainly that was my experience when I went sugar-free last year, and I've pretty much kept it up since then. Is, the nutrition labels are really your friend, and you find the brands that have got the least amount and stick with them, and over the long term, it certainly helps. It's a great advice. And just a comment here from Julie, suggest we take our own food and drink to social events, or ask them to provide something suitable and make a suggestion of what you can eat and drink. And I guess that thought occurred to me at the weekend as well. I was at, it was actually my daughter's hen party, and I was helping out with the catering, and my daughter said, oh, we've got someone vegan coming to the party, so you make an exception. And I found a lovely vegan cream cheese and made some sandwiches with it, and some chopped up sun-dried tomato and a bit of cucumber in the sandwiches. And hey, that's a vegan alternative. So what's wrong with saying to people, hey, we're on a no sugar diet? Can you provide for us?
Look, I will 100% back all of you up if you guilt trip the hosts of the events and you say to them, I'm doing this zero sugar, it's for a charity. So, they're not going to shame you for that. They're going to pat you on the back because they don't, and they're a bad person, right? So like you can guilt trip them into supporting you in a way, because it's in a positive way. Because you're doing this for a good cause, right?
Yeah.
It's a great cause. So they should be supportive of that. If they know why you're doing it, if you just say, oh, I'm on no sugar, they might just pass off, you're just on a diet or something, right? A fad or something. But help them understand you're doing it, it's for a charity, and it's worth supporting. So people will back you up.
Right. And just a follow-up question from Rich. Just to clarify with the label, are we looking for the lowest sugar and then the lowest carbs? Sorry, my connection went funny. And I think Rich is probably maybe referring to the fact, and I know when I'm looking at the labels, it'll give you your total carb content and then of which is sugars underneath. So it's my understanding is the sugars we're looking for, is it, in products? Or
no,
a bit of both?
You want total carbohydrates.
Right.
Now, okay, this gets a little bit, there's one more step here. When you look at total carbohydrates, sometimes it includes fiber, which doesn't count. Fiber is technically a carbohydrate, but you can't break it down, so it doesn't turn to sugar. So you want to do total carbohydrates, and if they do include fiber, then you just minus the fiber off. So that's what you want to look at, not the sugars. It's total carbohydrates, which will include carbohydrates, sugars, and sometimes they will include fiber. So you just always have to subtract the fiber if they are putting that on there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I think that's it for questions for now. So thanks very much, Sean. It was really insightful.
You're welcome.
I always learn something when I sit and listen to you talk about nutrition and gut health. Really interesting. Next week, Sean is going to be joining us again. And also our Chief Exec, Liam Willis, will be on the webinar next week. And we're going to be talking gut microbiome. So just going into a little bit more investigation about the gut and how it works, the impacts that your gut health can have on everything to do with health and well-being. So Sean will be covering that off next week. The other thing, I just want to do a quick shout out to everybody to say, keep up the great work on the fundraising. We're up to I think, let me hit refresh. We're just short of $106,000 raised, which is phenomenal. Just less than a week into the challenge. So keep up the great work. As I say, Liam Willis, our Chief Exec, is going to be joining you next week. He'll be giving you a little bit more detail on how we're going to make use of the funds that you're raising to support Kiwis with gut cancers in this country, and some of the research that has been funded in the past year and projects that we're looking at in the future. So do tune in next week. We've also, keep an eye on your emails. We've got a bit of fun going this week. We've got a prize pack on offer. We're doing a prize draw on Monday morning for anyone that has raised over $500. So keep an eye on your emails. We'll be sharing some fantastic prizes we've got on offer this week to celebrate the end of the first week of Give It Up. So thank you everyone again for joining us, for getting involved in the campaign. And that's it for now. We'll share the recording with everybody via email tomorrow and through the Facebook group. So thanks very much. Thanks again, Sean, and we'll see you next week online, same time, same place. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.